Welcome back to my channel, folks. Thanks for joining this morning. I have an incredible entrepreneur coming on in just a moment who's going to tell us his story about his business and how he created one of the largest startup ecosystems in the world. So he'll be joining us in a moment. Just before I bring Mohan on, I just want to mention why we are here. I have built a platform called The Purposeful Project. Our mission is to help 1 million people start a business of their own and make sure anyone that has started a business never feels alone doing it. I know myself, having built 18 companies, often I'm very lonely building those businesses. And it's strange to me that that even exists in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, because entrepreneurs, if you ask them, we all have empathy for the process and will always help. So if you need any help, you feel free to reach out today. If you have any questions, if you're watching this broadcast later, drop them into the comments down below. We always reply to comments, and we always try to get back to people that perhaps need a bit of help, a bit of support, and don't want to feel alone. Just before we kick off, I also want to say that we offer anybody a 15-minute free support conversation. So if you need help in your business, or you have a question that's particularly complicated, or you want us to simply listen and help you, I have a network of entrepreneurs all over the world that help me give you 15 minutes. So please feel free to sign up via thepurposefulproject.com and book a time to get some help with your business. We absolutely want nothing in return. We do webinars, we do content, and we never charge for any of it. We just want, frankly, the people that can't afford it to get help, as well as those that can. And that's why we never upsell. We're never asking for anything. We're just here to help you, full stop. Even my guests today, they're here just to help you, full stop. And so we might talk about what we're doing and how we're doing it, but in no way is it a sales plug. It is simply to give you background on our experience and maybe therefore give credibility to some of the opinions that we have. As I mentioned, we have content available for free on things like how to raise money, how to build a brand, not a business, how to leverage TikTok, how to work Clubhouse, any of these things that you're asking yourself right now, all free on my website. Literally just before this broadcast, I was just hosting a room. We had 500 people in it on Clubhouse. Absolutely incredible. We had some amazing entrepreneurs come on and talk about how Bitcoin works, how cryptocurrency is going to change the world. And all of that content and all of that knowledge, again, is available through our portal for free for you, even if you can't get on Clubhouse. So finally, I just mentioned each week we do interview the world's most successful and insightful entrepreneurs. And if you want to grab those podcasts, of course, you can get it on Spotify, Apple Music, or you can get it on about 35 channels now through the goodluckpod.com. You can actually grab all of those podcasts again for free. Last week, we sat down with Nick Jenkins. He is the founder of Moonpig. He sold it to Photobox for £150 million. He tells about the concept of a sole founder and why it worked for him. He talks about what he's doing now, how he invests, why he invests, and all sorts of interesting strategy around building a business. He was also a dragon on Dragon's Den. For those that don't know it, if you're listening in the US or in Asia, Dragon's Den is one of the most popular entrepreneurial shows in the UK. He was one of the dragons on Dragon's Den. In my opinion, one of the best. Always very kind and empathetic to the people pitching, always had good insights for the people pitching about their businesses. So go check out that podcast. I think you'll find it fascinating what he has to say. If you know anyone that would like to learn about Asia in particular today, or building a startup ecosystem, then my next guest, Mohan, is going to share that. So feel free to share this broadcast right now and pull people into this broadcast to learn some things today for free about entrepreneurship. I will be doing a webinar next week on how to use TikTok. I have managed to rope in the most popular business person on TikTok, a guy called Mark Tilbury. He has 6 million followers. His last video got 22 million views. He will be joining to give that webinar. Again, we will sell nothing in that webinar. We will just give you knowledge for free, because I feel free has value. And anyone that doesn't believe free has value has never not had the money to get knowledge. So free has a lot of value. So that's it. I would now like to ask Mohan to come up and introduce himself. And Mohan, welcome to my podcast. Great to have you here today.
Hey, Simon. Great to be here.
Would you mind telling the audience listening a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Mohan. I'm based in Singapore. I was lucky to spend a year in the San Francisco Bay Area. And that was like my first exposure to startups. So I run a tech and startup ecosystem platform based out of Singapore. we focus on the Southeast Asia tech startup ecosystem. Just like you, I'm very passionate about working with founders, with tech companies, especially. The whole reason why I do what I do is because I genuinely believe startups can make the world a better place. And especially in a region like Southeast Asia, when we first started, you can't fully let the governments solve a lot of the problems. The corporates have their own challenges. So it was really startups that are the kind of organizations that would be able to tackle the challenges in the region. And when we started way back in 2007 as a community in the university, and then in 2012, me and my co-founder decided to really build this like a business. Got an angel investor in, and it's been what it is today.
Was it a difficult decision to kind of jump in and do this, or was it just so obvious you had to do it?
It was very natural for us because the timing felt right. So this was sometime around 2012, where to give you a bit of context in the Singapore tech ecosystem, the government had been funding a lot of the activities, a lot of the early stage investments through grants, events, bringing mentors in from around the region. And sometime around 2012 was when you had a starting healthy amount of investments and founders starting companies, and not just founders out of school, right, or young founders, but founders that had background experiences. Even the more established corporates were more open to working with startups. So it was a slow tipping point that was starting to happen, that we felt like, hey, providing an ecosystem platform to help bridge the networks in the region, to help provide media and content, to do events and networking activities around the region would be really helpful.
And I was in Hong Kong when you kicked off what you're doing in Singapore, and it really was quite innovative. You were quite ahead of your time, I think, with what you pushed out. Did you feel that? How did you perceive what you were doing?
I remember working with you guys, right? And so coming out of Singapore, it was interesting because it allowed me to really understand how the different ecosystems regionally were working. And Hong Kong had a fairly established business environment, but maybe not the most established startup ecosystem, right? So it was interesting to see the differences between Singapore and Hong Kong back then. And then Southeast Asia, like for example, Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, all of them had varied differences in terms of the complexity and stages of the ecosystem. And I think for us, right, it was really about how can we add value to entrepreneurs that were on the ground that might not have the access to capital, access to relationships. They might not have gone to the right schools, like the Stanfords of the world, to be able to get the support they need to grow their businesses. So we found that one congruent standard use case, which is that entrepreneurs really needed help. They needed access to talent. They needed access to funding, especially in the early stage. And through our activities, we were hoping to provide some support there.
I love the way you describe how you started the business. You had the idea with your co-founder, and then you got angel investment. I mean, a lot of people, that is a big couple of steps you've made there. You have a co-founder and you found an angel investor. Was it hard to convince someone to invest in the business, or was it again natural?
I think for me it was a good timing, right? So I was actually pitching for another company that I had, and that was a gaming company that I started 2 years prior. And the honest thing is that my heart just wasn't in the business anymore. I started it; it was fun. We were making money, and we had bootstrapped it. But when I was pitching it to the investor, at some point I told him, I said, "Hey, I don't think I'm going to carry on with this." So we hung out a bit, and he asked me, "So what are you going to do next?" And that's when I was sharing with him the idea of E27. And for him, he was starting out his fund, and he was starting to get more active in angel investments as well. So he could see the value of investing in a company like ours, while also putting in like his own personal time and effort and mentorship with young founders like us. So he put in a very small amount, but for us back then, it was like 6 months worth of runway at the very least, right? And A, it gave us a bit of credibility in what we were doing. B, it really gave us, in some sense, some sort of adult supervision. We had like a big brother to go, and talk to for guidance, right? Everything from like how to build relationships with maybe more corporate-centric people, because he came from the finance world, to even how to plan out our next fundraise. So our angel investor then, his name is Nick Lim. He was very instrumental in helping us get our seed round, which happened about 9 months after his angel investment. So for me, I think that process happened purely out of accident, and it was a marriage of strong alignments.
You could say it was luck.
Yeah, I think a large part of it was luck. Nick always tells me, you've got to believe in luck, and I definitely do so a lot now.
And so you kicked off in 2012. Now, I mean, at that time, there's always been a bit of a rivalry, I guess, between Hong Kong and Singapore. Actually, not within the business community. The business community, we collaborate, but conceptually, right? There's always like the Singapore model versus the Hong Kong model. As the startup ecosystems have matured, what do you see as the differences now, or what do you think the future holds for Singapore, for example? And correct me if I'm wrong. At the time when you launched, you also launched a big event, right? A big kind of a get together. But I noticed that was it the founder of Facebook, Severin?
Eduardo Severin, yeah.
He moved to Singapore around that time as well, and there was quite a lot of controversy around it.
Yeah, he moved actually way earlier, sometime around 2009, where he was very low key, right, in the first couple of years. And then he definitely started to get a bit more prominent in just after the movie got released and when he started to make a bit more government appearances. But I think for him, on one level, it was about telling the world, right, that hey, Singapore is the place to be for innovation. Singapore is a place to be for funding and capital. And he put his money where his mouth is, right, by raising funds and stuff like that. He's also actively been investing regionally. So that was a big trigger. But I think the challenge with Singapore is that for the longest time, there were always big wigs coming to Singapore, trying to do some sort of activity. You had Joey Ito from the former MIT Media Labs. He was in Singapore for a while. But you never had anyone really actively coming in. So one of the things that we don't talk about very much, but we worked on in around 2011, 2012 period, was a program with the government to get smart people from around the world to spend minimum a month in Singapore, investing and mentoring companies with the ideal hope that they would actually move their families and build businesses. So that program ended up launching a few local investors that were very active in the early stage venture capital space, and even some local startups. Some of them actually went back to the US and then came back many years ago later, and now work at companies like Grab. I think so. It's really about the initial seeds, right, that were happening, and I think that's very important for any ecosystem.
Singapore is being really praised from a government perspective on its support of the ecosystem. Do you think that's bearing fruit now, or there's still a lot of work to do?
So it's a constant evolution, right? I think it's definitely been bearing fruit for the last 10 years. But the role of government is to always be like a catalyst for the ecosystem and to figure out when to take a step back and when to let the ecosystem move on its own. In the early days, it was about seed funding or early stage capital, or even like bringing in mentors. Now in the later stages, it's really all about the policy around manpower, supporting entrepreneurs in getting them better connections with corporates, in setting up programs to incentivize companies to use digital technology. So it has completely shifted, and I think the role of government will continue to evolve. It's a necessary role. I think it's an important role the government plays in every ecosystem. So unlike maybe the US, where the model is don't work with government, in Southeast Asia it's definitely different. The government does play a helpful role, but you've got to find a balance. And I think every government in the region is trying to figure out where they can add value.
It's very interesting, as someone that lived in Asia for 20 years and you get all the news from Asia. Now I'm, for the last 3 years, been living in London. And it's interesting what news breaks through as to what's happening in Asia. So, for example, Dyson, there was a big headline. Dyson moved his headquarters to Singapore.
Yep.
Right. And then that was kind of the headline that, England's in trouble because one of the most innovative entrepreneurs doesn't see it as a good idea to have his company HQ'd out of England. So he sets up in Singapore. But at the same time, the next news headline, and I wonder what's true and what is the news media painting it the way they want to paint it. But one of the things that then came out of the news cycle was that Dyson was trying to do an electric car out of
Yep.
Singapore, and it failed, so he dropped it.
Yep.
What's the truth in these headlines? What is actually happening in the Singapore market? What's actually happening in Asia, in your view? Is a lot of stuff blowing your mind, or is it overhyped? What do you think?
Yeah, so I think that the Singapore government is really good at attracting, big names. The EDB has been doing that for many years, right? From like the giant tech companies to large manufacturing companies. They do a really good job of providing the infrastructure and support at the early stages to allow these companies to set up base. But I think what the government does really well is to let market forces decide, let these organizations, make the decisions that they need to do to ensure the business is sustainable. And I think that's something the government does really well. They roll out the red carpet for you. They make sure that getting here is an easy, or not say easy, but as smooth of a process as possible. But if you're unable to get your business to succeed here, or you're unable to make it sustainable in the long term, then they will not provide additional support. So we've seen that. We've seen them do that quite a bit with like venture capital firms. We've definitely seen them do that with Dyson, for example. But we've also seen them play a role where, with Tesla as another example, where in the early days they weren't fully hands-on or supportive in terms of welcoming Tesla. It was very much a decision for them to make. But now that the ecosystem has changed, the focus of green vehicles and reducing carbon emissions has changed, they've become a bit more welcoming and open to that. I think just today they announced in the budget speech a lot more support for electric vehicles, for charging stations, for rebates and incentives for people to go green. So it kind of really depends on what the flavor of the month is for the government agencies. But that being said, right, I think Singapore will and will continue to forever welcome talent from around the world and do its very best to support them to be successful over here.
And without putting you on the spot, but I guess a lot of my audience are involved in cryptocurrency and Bitcoin and all that.
Yeah.
What's Asia's take on it right now? Do you see is Singapore moving into this space more, or is it still very cautious around it all?
No, I think Singapore is probably one of the more forward-thinking agencies. The Monetary Authority of Singapore has been working on various projects. Probably the more well-known one is Project Ubin, which is a blockchain ledger system that helps with the flow of currencies around the different banks.
What's it called? I'm sorry, what's it called?
Project Ubin, UBIN.
Okay. Project Ubin. Yeah.
So they've been spending a lot of time. Like they've gone through multiple phases, and I believe now they're in like phase 5 of the project. It's a full-fledged distributed ledger. I won't go into the details, but the point I'm making is that the central bank themselves are leading the forefront in terms of DLT technology. Singapore, in the early boom of crypto, which I believe was in 2017, they did try to make Singapore like a bit of a hub for it. So I think there was a lot of support for crypto type companies that wanted to base here. So this was the interesting part, right? The government, the central bank were very supportive of crypto, but the challenge on that side was the banks themselves. So I remember there were a lot of debates with respect to crypto-centric companies operating here because the banks were not always favorable to doing business with them. But I think that has definitely changed, right? So you've had DBS, which is the large bank over here, launch some sort of a crypto exchange. You've got definitely a lot more support for crypto companies. And I think the sentiment towards blockchain companies has definitely changed in the last few years now that you have more legitimate investors actually investing in the space as well.
I think the platform business is moving so fast. I mean, I just mentioned earlier, I was on Clubhouse earlier. I think Clubhouse has got all the social media networks, frankly, a little bit nervous. I'm hardly on LinkedIn anymore. I'm hardly on these other social network platforms. Facebook is pretty much asleep as far as I'm concerned. And I think Clubhouse may be my space in the future, but it's definitely changing the way things work. What's your view? How do you stay so innovative? I still go on your platform all the time because you have such interesting information and insights on there. But how do you stay innovative in this kind of fast-moving world we're in now?
I think it's an attitude and a mindset, right? Like, so I remember having conversations with an old friend of mine one day. We were just catching up, and he was very against blockchain and crypto, just dissing the potential and opportunities, and I was very much for it. And I said to him, I said, hey, 10 years ago, every new technology or any new Silicon Valley company that pops up, we would be all over it. We'd be excited by the potential, right? Even though 99 out of 100 of them would fail. And I say, I think it's important if you're in tech, you need to constantly have that mindset. Like I completely agree that I'm actually a lot more skeptical, a lot more judging on what's new out there. But at the same time, I have to remind myself that if I don't make an effort to try or change the way I do things, I will become a laggard, right? I remember when Snapchat first came out, I struggled to understand it. We had a brown bag session in the office where we got some of the younger colleagues to explain it to us and teach us how it works. I still never entirely got it, but I think it's very, very important to try things and not just shut them out or look at the negatives of it. And I think that's the same thing with Clubhouse, right? Like a lot of the maybe more senior people in the industry are going like, oh, Clubhouse is just a waste of time. It's a fad, it's all hype. But I prefer to look at the opportunities that Clubhouse has to offer and how it could potentially change consumer behavior. I really like Clubhouse, but I'm also very aware that it does take up a lot of time. It can really suck you in. So I'm very mindful of that. The interesting thing is Clubhouse is actually the only app I have on my phone that I've turned on notifications. And in a way, right, I deliberately did this because I just want to know what's going on. And I want to be, in a way, I want to put myself a bit out there to be a bit more participative on this platform before it becomes too late. So that's how I actually force myself to keep ahead with technology. It's very, very difficult at this age. It's very, very difficult at this stage of life because you just don't have that much time. But I think it's really critical that we always do so. The last thing you want to be, right, is in 5 years not being able to understand how a lot of these systems work. And I think that's my fear with platforms like blockchain, crypto, and new social media platforms like Clubhouse.
Yeah, I used to own a digital agency called Fluid in Hong Kong. I'm sure you remember. And I remember when Twitter came into our lives, and I said to the team, we all need to get on Twitter and learn how it works. And a lot of the people in my team were like, one more thing we need to do, one more social network we have to work on, really. And there's always that initial resistance, isn't there, to it? And I think the problem is as well, I spent a bit of time on Vine, for example, just playing around with it. But we build up a following and then it's gone. So it almost feels like a lost investment. But like you say, I think especially if you're running a platform business, you've kind of got to know what's happening. So I just confirmed yesterday to invest in a new business. It's in stealth mode right now, but it's looking to be a competitor to Clubhouse, which I find fascinating. There's already people stepping up to the plate and saying, here's what's wrong with Clubhouse and here's how I'm going to make it better. And it's it's still a new thing. So it is an interesting space. And
I'm keen to see all the clones from China, how they will tackle this concept, right?
It got blocked. It
got blocked in China, and then now they're like, I think 10 or 15 clones already. And knowing the Chinese market, right, they have very interesting ways of approaching these kind of things. So I'm imagining all sorts of like virtual goods, tokens, coin-based models, video kind of things being added, filters, like Clubhouse on steroids, essentially. Right?
Pretty much it. These apps coming out of America always follow this kind of like very simple model, which does make them successful, which is very much a focus on one thing and do it well. So in Clubhouse's case, voice. But China has a different strategy. I think it's like, let's do one thing well, voice, and then add 10 other things and do it well.
That is the difference. If you read Lee Kai-Fo's book, right, he would actually very deeply illustrate the difference in cultures and why China does it that way and why the US does it in a more simplistic way. So that's a good book for people to check out if they want to really understand the differences between Chinese and American tech culture.
Well, he is quite an amazing individual himself, isn't he? But do you see now what's the future for your business? I mean, you started in 2012. You've built up this incredible ecosystem. But what is the next step for you?
So we're really just barely scratching the surface, because in the past few years we've been very focused on offline engagements, events. So we used to run one of the largest tech conferences in the region. And the unique thing about it is that in order for us to connect the entire region together, we literally had to do 15 events all across the region, micro ones, and then culminating to the Singapore one. And the challenge that I used to always complain about is that the business had, the weakness of the business was that it was restricted by time and space, right? The entrepreneur had to be in the right place at the right time. If he launched his business after the event, we wouldn't be able to help him. And I think COVID was an amazing thing that happened for us, because it completely forced us or disallowed us from doing events. So we've had to build an entire community layer on our existing media platform that includes the ability for people to connect with each other, to fundraise. We're adding more features in that, but essentially we've been able to transition our offering from a media platform to a tech ecosystem platform, which is really what we've always wanted to do, but we've always done offline, but now we're doing it.
I think, it's interesting, isn't it? You actually said to me outside the broadcast when we spoke recently that in a way, COVID as a business strategy has kind of helped you move away from the event side and move more virtual, which is giving you the ability to be global, really. You're not restricted by the places that you can action events, right? Which is quite powerful. Especially, someone in Europe, I feel like Europe and America are quite nicely linked. But I find Asia is always a missing piece here. I mean, there's a lot of people floating around that say they build a bridge between Europe and Asia, but I don't see anyone doing it in a meaningful way, frankly. So, having a platform that allows, I guess, European startups to get funding from Asia or vice versa, and have meaningful connections in both markets, I think is a really powerful opportunity that you have as a platform.
It is. There is value, but it's extremely difficult, right? And to give you context, right, the bridge between even Australia and Southeast Asia is not very strong, right? And I think for European companies, for Australian companies, the tendency is still to go to the US, especially if you're fundraising or you want to go and look into a new market first, and not to go to Southeast Asia. And there are definitely pros and cons to that, but I think more and more entrepreneurs are now open to the idea of going to Singapore and the rest of Southeast Asia as a next step, because it is the fastest growing internet ecosystem globally. And the barriers of entry, I wouldn't say are low, but they're still somewhat lower than more established ecosystems like China and the US.
Well, Mohan, I actually want to talk to you all day. Half an hour's gone super quick. I want to bring on the entrepreneur who reached out to us, who would like some advice and some support. So Matt is coming on now. Matt, are you there?
Nice to meet you guys. Nice to meet you, Mohan.
Hi, Matt. Nice to meet you.
So Matt, welcome to the stage. I'm on Clubhouse so much, I say to the stage these days all the time. Definitely too much time on Clubhouse. But Matt, welcome. Would you like to tell the audience listening and Mohan a little bit about what you're doing and how we might be able to help you today?
So Mohan, it's great having you on, because I think you would have obviously Simon, it's great meeting you as well. But I think Mohan, you particularly, having run your successfully run the platform. So I basically, for the last 10 years, have been a small creative services agency owner in the UK. So that would be employing a couple of people and doing a mixture of video content, branding, design work, and such like. And what I noticed is that more often than not, we were competing against freelancers in our space, because a good freelancer could probably do the work we were doing for a client. And rather than getting frustrated by this, I thought, well, if you can't beat them, join them, and I thought my business itself would really benefit from working with a network of really good freelancers. And I found that when we did, it actually really helped us pitch for work that we couldn't normally pitch for. But I also realized that my clients would really benefit from this sort of much bigger network of freelancers I'd found, because they were great people to work for. And it meant that we could just do better work for them. So I changed the business model of my agency, Vebu, to be more of a creative platform. So rather than it being a standard agency, actually saying to clients, look, we can be flexible with the way that you want to work with us. We can give you the agency offering, which is we'll manage those projects for you. Or you can work with our network of creatives directly. But it's actually just saying to clients, look, we live in a world now where the freelance creative market, certainly in the UK, is absolutely enormous, and it's growing. And so that's the way that I want to scale up my business, so that Vebu really becomes this freelance platform. But we're also saying to clients, we'll manage those projects for you. So that's the pitch. We're growing quite nicely. We've obviously got small sort of company issues in terms of the way we're growing. Interestingly, I spend a huge amount of time finding this talent, and it's very, very time consuming finding great people. There's one thing saying to clients, we want to provide you with the best, but actually finding great people, they are out there, but that takes a lot of time itself.
Yeah.
But actually, I've got a question for you, Mohan, which is I've based my model around we will manage. There are a lot of freelance platforms out there at the moment. Fiverr, they all do great work, but I'm pitching our freelance model into the middle corporate section, where we're paying good UK freelance rates, but also sending clients. A typical client might come to us and say, look, we want to do a little bit of performance marketing. We need a website. We need a bit of branding doing. So we're bringing on board probably 5 or 6 different freelancers together and managing that process.
Yeah.
So my question to you would be is sometimes we have issue. It's not an issue, but it's actually selling through how we differentiate ourselves from a classic freelance market, but also saying that we sit between a sort of standard agency as well. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think it boils down to, okay, firstly, right, I think the opportunity that you've tapped on is fantastic, and I'm a big fan of a lot of these freelancer type markets, right? Personally invested in Fiverr, and I love the value that they're offering, especially when it comes to the current pandemic context and democratizing access to talent. So really like what you're doing there. The thing that you got to ask yourself is, what kind of company do you want to run? Right? If you want to run a massively scalable venture-backed business where you need to be growing at a very rapid rate year on year, then you might at some point in time have to shift to a full-fledged talent marketplace, right? Yeah. And you can tap on the niche of the talent that you have, which is basically people within the creative sectors that are more specific for agency type work, and then along the way you can branch out into other sectors, like maybe people in tech, maybe people in print or the likes. But you have to decide the kind of company you want to run, right? If you want to do something that's a bit more customized, then you can stick to what you're doing now. But then the challenge is you might not be able to scale and grow that rapidly.
I agree.
The other thing you could also do is to have 2 tiers, right? You have the lower tier, which is the self-serve tier, where you have the platform, you provide them access to the freelancers and they do it themselves. And then you have the upper tier, which is like the managed service tier. So the context that I want to give, for example, is like WordPress. WordPress is the free tier where anybody can go create a WordPress blog, but they also have a managed tier where if you're a corporate and you want WordPress to help you and do all the heavy lifting and manage everything, you can pay a premium for it, right? So that's the other way you can differentiate, so that you don't lose the cream clients, but you also allow yourself to scale. And I think it really boils down on the kind of company that you want to build, the kind of problems that you want to tackle and go after. So in our case personally, right, like we were more like what you are now. We had a bunch of clients, we're doing work for them from a sponsorship standpoint and all that. But more so, we wanted to shift to a model where the platform is available, use it, it's more self-serve. And I can tell you that the challenges are rapidly different. Pros and cons, the business model is different. But in our case, we feel that in the long term, it provides for a more sustainable business.
You see, that's the business you describe in terms of the scalable platform is the way I'd like to go. And at the moment, I've got a sort of a minimal viable product in terms of what you get as a client when you come onto it, but it's not automated at all. At the moment, I just wanted to prove that this could work, that you could work in this way as a client. And I feel as though now, if I'm really going to take it further, I need to take on board serious investment to make sure that I build this wonderful, engaging platform where clients can come on board and get this wonderful experience of finding the great person, but also knowing that they can scale up their projects up or down and very easily do that on the platform, but nowhere in the background as well.
I like having an account manager help them out if they have roadblocks along the way and stuff like that.
Exactly.
I think the challenge to think about also, right? If you look at a platform like, for example, 99 Designs, you don't need an agency to help you with that. Literally, an intern could handle it, or even a very senior person, because it's solving one problem really, really well, right? But if you're looking at providing a full suite kind of service to agents, understanding whether is your customer able to do it on their own self-serve is important as well. Some industries are structured in a way where they just need that hands-on guidance and service, and that's where you really come in, right? Because you know the market, you know the industry, you know best how to tap on these folks. And I think the same challenges existed for the edutech, the education technology industry, right? Like when COVID hit, all the edutech companies thought that the schools would automatically be able to onboard and use their services, but a lot of them realized it really wasn't that straightforward, and they needed a lot of handholding. And I think on your end, that's something for you to think about, right? Are there specific problems that you want to support these companies with that you can fully automate, and then have to forego a lot of the ones that require a lot more hands-on service? I think that's something you have to think about.
Thank you very much. That's really good advice, and actually reassuring that I'm thinking that way at the moment. I feel as though at the moment the offering is good, but sometimes actually the way we're explaining it to clients can be unclear, because I'm keen that we don't go down to the bottom end where Fiverr and all those places are doing great jobs already. We want to stay in the more sort of corporate middle end, where actually, to be honest with you, there's probably better profit margins as well to be made out of businesses. But it's finding that way of saying to businesses, actually, this project isn't just you working with a freelancer. We think you need help here for us to be able to help you manage that project. And actually showing our value in doing that sometimes is actually explaining to a client, you really do need help here.
No, you're absolutely right. So the marketing technology ecosystem is very, very good for doing this, right? So simple example like MailChimp is the Fiverr example, where they cater to small businesses. They won't even reply your emails, and you're basically on your own, but it's cheap and easy. And then you've got the other end, which is, for example, a company called Sailthrough, based out of New York, that only caters to like Fortune 500 companies, and their minimum pricing tier is like $200,000 a year, right? And they will handhold you, they will provide like guidance for you, but they'll make sure your email marketing campaigns are phenomenal. And I think what you're looking at is basically being in the Sailthrough kind of sector, where it's high value clients. It's a fixed number of clients that you want to work with on a yearly basis, but they're really, really high value, and it's a mix of a managed service and a technology platform.
And you still feel as though that's a very scalable way of growing a business. Is just I think I probably suffer from sometimes small business owner, which is almost as if you find it very difficult to turn down clients. And I think probably, you've reassured me in the sense that sometimes you've actually got to be ballsy enough to say, look, this is what our client looks like.
Yeah,
i.e. high net worth or FTSE 100 or whatever, and we should just stick to working with those clients and just they are just the clients we're going to service, and learn to turn other people down.
I think it's super important to know your client. I just had a conversation with another startup today, right? And I said that I think it's really personally important, right, to list down every client that you ideally want to have, and also list down those that you don't want to have, so that you have some sense of clarity with respect to your go-to-market plans. You also want to be making sure, right, that you don't randomly take on opportunities just because it's an opportunity. Yeah. Right. And then you get distracted, right? Then you start doing anything and everything and then nothing at all.
Yeah.
But the last thing is also like you want to be making sure that you are quantifying your market potential. Because if you start going through this exercise and then you realize that, hey, there are only 100 clients that can maybe pay you $20,000 a year, that you can serve. Then you start to realize that maybe you need to broaden your use case. Maybe you need to change your feature sets to reach out to a larger network. But it's that kind of internal simulation that you do, right, that really gives you a sense of what your roadmap, your customer roadmap is going to look like over the next year. And I think it's very, very important to figure out that GTM plan, who these guys are, how are you going to get to them, and what's the average basket size for every deal, and how big of an opportunity this is.
Yeah. How, in terms of, just so you know, Mohan, fantastic advice. This is absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much for this. Sure. In terms of going out and looking for investment, I've basically gone down the route of thinking I've set up a very basic platform to show that it works. Is that it, or do you think investors want to see that I've developed something a lot more? As long as I have designs to show people and say, listen, this is why I want the investment and how I think it could look. Is that enough for investors, or do you think they want me to? You've got to go further than just a very simple product at the moment.
So I can only share from the context of Singapore and Southeast Asia, right? I would assume it's quite different in Europe. The thing with investment is this, right? Like, the longer you can bootstrap your company, I feel, the better it is for you.
Yeah.
Right. And the more conviction you have towards building your business. Fundamentally, right, you raise capital for a purpose. And I think you have to be very clear to the investors what that purpose is. If you're raising capital to hire a team to do something that you currently cannot do, which is, for example, build technology or build feature sets, right? Then you have to prove to the investors that A, you have very good access to that kind of talent, or B, you are extremely clear, right, that these are the kind of things that you need to build that gets you the next milestone. And that has to come from either relationships that you have, or it has to come from access to certain customers that you're very, very clear will come on board with that feature set. So that's one aspect of fundraising that I would think about in the early stages. The second aspect of fundraising I would think about is that if you already have a product market fit, and you know that, okay, you've tested this product with 20 companies, they're paying you, they really like your service, and if you pulled out or cancelled your service tomorrow, they would scream at you. That's product market fit in my view, right? Now, you need to raise capital to build a team to go from 20 to 200, right? And the reason why you need to build the team is because maybe you need certain people in certain markets, or you need certain people to close the deals or service the companies or build infrastructure or whatever. And I think that's what investors want to know, right? That I'm putting my capital, it's going to be working in this way, and it's going to bring the company from this current milestone to the next milestone. And I think investors want to see not just the milestone that their capital will affect, but a few stages down the road as well, right? All the way to the exit level. So I think it's the kinds of investors that you bring in are completely different for these two stages. In the first one, right, it's really more the angel investors, the people that believe in you and your vision, the people that want to see you succeed, and the people that are more averse towards taking a crazy amount of risk, right? The later stage might be more institutionalized investors, maybe the VCs or the early stage funds, where due diligence, legality, really sitting down and understanding the business plan is very critical to them, right? And these two types of investors operate very, very differently. For the first group, right, I think it's very natural that they like you personally.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the investment thesis is on, I trust Matt to do this, right? Or I like Matt enough to do this, or I believe in what Matt is doing there, I want to give it to him. The later part is really a lot of the business. Yes, of course, the team is critical, but it becomes a lot more holistic. Is there a market opportunity? Does the company have the technology to solve this problem compared to other competitors? And do they have the right team? So then it becomes a lot more holistic.
That's great. Great advice. Great advice.
Matt, I would just add, first of all, you know, I used to own an agency called Fluid, which I sold to PwC. So I have a lot of understanding of how the creative folks think. And scaling that business up was, the hardest bit was not getting clients. The hardest bit was finding good people. So
Yes.
there's definitely a big thing around this. Now, when I listen to you, there's a few things that go through my mind that might be useful. I think what Mohan said, everything he's just said is spot on, actually. And the reason I love having him on, I could just go and have my breakfast and leave Mohan to run the podcast, because honestly, everything he just said is totally right.
No, it's great advice. Very good.
I would only build on it and say that although I agree saying no to things is good, I also think there is a need to be a little bit more nuanced about things. So, for example, what is a client? What is the client you want? Yes or no? Who is a partner, not a client? So I think you have an interesting dynamic you need to figure out a bit, which is, who is your client? Well, is it the freelancer? Okay. Well, what value are you bringing that freelancer? Okay. And then the other side, who is the client? Oh, the person potentially giving them work. Okay. Now it's getting confusing. Who's the client? Who's the client? Who's the partner? And actually, when you define those two carefully, you have very different conversations with your partners than you do with a client, right? Yeah. Kind of client is king, a partner you debate, right? So I think that's a distinction I think you need to make. And just for the sake of making you think right brain for a second, I'm married to a designer. Okay, I'm married to one, and she loves creating. She hates dealing with clients, right? And I think what I noticed with Fiverr, what's missing from Fiverr is it's still the designer talking to a client, and in itself, that is the problem with Fiverr, right? And the reason I had a big agency is because I'm not a designer, and I help the two sides understand each other. A designer would say, "I need 24 hours to do this." A client would say, "I need it in 3 hours." Right? And the only reason I had a business was because I was the voice in the middle, explaining to both sides why they're both right.
Yes. Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I feel like there's still a gap there that makes you can still compete with Fiverr along the whole food value chain, the whole thing. But I think if you created, I'm going to call it customer service support for both sides of the equation. I know myself, I still have to hire, my wife's a graphic designer, not a digital designer. So I still have to hire digital people. And quite often it's literally misunderstandings in the language of what needs to get done that causes a lot of work for both sides. And so
I totally agree.
Defining client, defining partner, being very, very detailed about that, because you don't want to say no to the wrong partner. You don't want to say yes to the wrong client. And I think, the business model itself, to me, is crucial to make that work.
No, I agree. And actually, also, what I'm finding, to the point, actually, Mohan, as well about not taking on some clients and others. What I'm doing at the moment is almost not saying no to anybody, because I'm finding every single client is a learning process about how this workflow is working. So more often than not, I'm taking on jobs just to test, why isn't this working? Just to your point, Simon. I've very quickly found out that some freelancers are absolutely brilliant at doing their jobs, but are terrible at client relationships, which is almost justifies why Vebu needs to be there, because they're wonderfully talented, but you just wouldn't put them in front of a client. Or even what freelancers love is just knowing there's a work schedule there, and they're going to get paid on time. Yeah. So it's just guaranteeing that sort of structure on both sides that the client and the freelancer like.
But who is your client?
Well, that's quite interesting, actually, because I think you're making a very, very good point there, actually, Simon, because it hit me very late on that I needed to take the community as seriously. Last year, I was going hell for leather finding clients and not spending enough time developing the community. And I actually realized as soon as I started developing the community, I started getting better clients and just started feeling so much better about the business, because I really enjoy finding great people for work. I enjoy linking up great freelancers with clients and seeing that we're massively over delivering. So the community and the clients are as important as each other.
Well, I have to say, I've actually written a book on this subject. Partly, I didn't realize, Matt, where this was going to go. But my book talks about how I built my agency. One element of it was when I started out, a client for me was CNN. That was one of my big clients, right? And as I developed the business and realized the problem was actually in retaining talent, my client became the creative folks. So much so that I ended up marrying one of them. That's how dedicated I got to looking after the client, which was the designer, right? And it basically stopped people from quitting. It stopped people from leaving, because I was always on the side of the designer, always. And the clients eventually, although they didn't always like the tough love we gave them, they also knew the problem. The reason they came to us in the first place is because they couldn't find a designer that they could work with, right? They were their own worst enemy. So they, in the end, got their respect too. And then the other surprising thing about this model, which I think you could replicate through an app, is the designers had clients of their own, which they would then bring to Fluid.
Yeah.
I was the only salesperson. I think at one point we had nearly 200 people on our books, creative wise, right? And I was the only salesperson, right? Think about that for a moment, you know, and the reason in part was because the designers do good work. That means the client stays with you and then they recommend you to other people. And then the other side of it is that a lot of the designers, they had people wanting to work with them, but you said earlier, I can tell where your mind is right now. Your mind is focused, and it's not wrong with it. It's just an observation. Your mind is focused still on getting the work for the designers, right? And so when you speak, you know, when you say they don't like talking to customers, right? You're basically saying that they are the product, right? So you need to change your wording. And just my opinion, but you need to change your wording to like.
No, that's a fair comment.
Yeah. Yeah,
but I've actually also come around to this other. I've also come around to this other point, which actually leads on from what you're saying, Simon. Is if you show confidence and enthuse people to do bigger and better things, i.e., the freelance community, they will help you with either content or if they're promoting themselves and they can see how they're going to benefit from promoting themselves. And I want to help people do that. I want to hold, say, for example, go onto Clubhouse and have freelance Clubhouse chats about helping freelancers. So if you are helping people get more work, they will respond by doing good work for you. And also what that means is the clients will love them and also give them more work. So the whole thing is by encouraging them, you're encouraging them to help grow your own business.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally. Actually, Matt, there's a huge opportunity, right? With respect to building the community and getting them to stay not just for the clients, but for the benefit of each other, right? And I think with strong communities, people want a sense of belonging. They want to contribute. They want to be seen as a thought leader.
I agree.
And so I'll give you an example of us, right? Like, so our platform, we allow any startup founder to create content. And in most of the media sites, you either have to send a press release and then a journalist internally has to create the article. But over here, we say, hey, anybody can be a thought leader as long as you are writing quality content. And this is separate from them fundraising on the platform or having their profiles. Because we realize that good founders naturally want to give back. They want to contribute to the ecosystem. But they also indirectly do want to get visibility for the company. But the giving first or the contributing first mantra always resonates first. And I think that same logic appears with people in your network, right? Like Dribble as a company has been able to do so well simply because people are open to sharing their skills and supporting each other within the community. There's a big potential.
I also wanted to explore as well is that if you can help people connect on the community, that they would also be able to grow their client relationships. One of the things I say to freelancers when we bring on board is I encourage you to grow your client relationship with the person that we're connecting you with, and also use our network to be able to do bigger and better work. And a very interesting example, there's lots of examples like this, is as an animator, more often than not, will expect a script to come from a copywriter. But more often than not, I'm saying to animators, if we connected you with a copywriter, you could just do this job on your own. You don't need Vebu to manage this project for you. You just need a good copywriter partner.
Yeah.
And it's this whole idea of encouraging the freelancers to make connections within Vebu so that they can grow their own businesses. I suppose that's probably one of the underlying things I want Vebu to do is encourage people to grow their own businesses.
Yeah, I think down the road, right, you could even start to build premium services for the community members that are actually willing to get specific access or specific visibility on the platform.
Yeah.
And maybe even convert the entire platform to be more of a portfolio showcase kind of site, right? So I think from a with a strong community, right, it doesn't just always have to be you giving them opportunities to make money through client projects, but it can be a lot more than that, right? Once you're able to really harness the power of the community helping each other.
Great.
It's really interesting what you're doing, Matt. I think it's a really a space that needs to be conquered. But I see the client as the creatives. And I think you could even probably, if you did a test in your community right now, I bet someone would pay to get a customer service manager to help them with a client they've already got, for example.
I don't quite get your point, actually, Simon. Do you mind expanding on that a little bit when you say the client is the client is the creative? Sorry, are you saying that the freelancer that I'm referring to is actually my client, really?
Yes.
Is that what oh, yeah. Okay, I do get that. Yes, I do get that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant.
And I think you have to do everything to make their lives better.
Yeah, I agree.
Because right now, Fiverr is making it easier for people to find creatives. That's creatives. I think you have the opportunity to go the other way.
And also the other thing is having talked to a lot of freelancers that have been on a lot of these platforms, a lot of them say it's just it's the Wild West out there on these platforms in terms of people just beating you down on price, more often than not joining the platform, not getting any work. And it's just what I want to do with Vebu is turn that on that head, turn it on its head, and make the freelancer a really nice experience for the freelancer.
Yeah. How much are you raising? When you say you're raising money, what I mean, I actually think what Mohan said is really important. By the way, I don't want to overlook it. You know, you should try to bootstrap for as long as you can. But there is a moment when you need to raise money to scale to make sure you don't lose the opportunity and don't stay. It sounds like you don't want to be a small business. If that's a decision you've made, then scaling up, money can do that. But what is your need right now? Do you think on that front?
So I think right now, the platform itself needs to become an experience. At the moment, it's a basic login where you can put your work on our platform, but it needs to be a proper experience of being able to modularly build and show projects that you've got and be able to modularly build sort of skill sets in to be able to work these projects. And I think it's going to take a couple $100,000 to actually do that.
Wow.
But because I want it to be, and also from the freelancer point of view, to that point where we want the freelancer experience to be fantastic as well, is this whole idea of helping freelancers connect with other freelancers to be able to do jobs as well.
Can you do an MVP around that? Because that sounds like a different business to me, by the way. That sounds like a community business. So I think there's a business in it where the community, I have it on my Discord, right? I have a Discord channel where pretty much every night I help people with questions they have on business, right? And I don't know how we're connected, Matt. How did we connect? What channel?
I think you know Dom Cotton.
Oh, okay.
And Josh. So they said you were a good guy to follow. So New Line.
Okay. Okay. Now I make.
And actually, I think I saw you on Clubhouse as well on one of the breakfast shows.
Well, there you go. That's another example. I think you can do an MVP around what you just said there. Like, we have at my platform a LinkedIn group where people are helping each other all the time.
Yeah.
Right. And so you don't need to go spend a couple of £100,000 and lose equity and all that. You can actually just leverage Clubhouse and do something every day on Clubhouse for creative people, for example. Or you can leverage a LinkedIn group. You can build that and see if that's even something, without having to go and build an experience. Let the people that come into that platform create the experience, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good point.
Yeah, and so if you were asking me for money, I just invested in a new Clubhouse. So I've just been knee deep in community related stuff. And I think the trigger has to be really, what is your core business? And I think that's what we're discussing now. And I think, who is your client? Before you raise money, you want to get these things as clear as you can. Because what you're going to spend that money on is ultimately going to be whether or not someone will invest in you. So if you say £200,000 to me, I would be pushing back. And then what you need to do is say one of two things to an investor. Simon, you're wrong. I know what I'm doing. This is what we're going to do. You're not in. That's fine. I'll find someone that gets it. Right? Saying no to an investor is also important. To Mohan's point about clients, I also think making sure you get the right investor that shares your vision is important.
Yeah.
If you don't have a clear vision, most investors are pretty pushy people, right? They're gonna push you into their vision, right?
Well, I think that's just to your point, Simon. I'm quite interested to know. When you sort of see these valuations where we've just seen sort of Bumble raising billions or whatever like that. Or I listen a lot to the Reid Hoffman Masters of Scale podcast. His attitude is with platforms is just try and raise as much money as you can. So when you say to me, oh, 50 grand, 100 grand, or $500,000, I think actually I don't quite know where I should be pitching. So what do you think?
Mohan said this earlier. He said, what do you want to spend the money on? If you're raising money, you should be having a very clear idea of what you're going to spend the money on. And I think, I know exactly what you mean. I'm a big fan of Reid Hoffman, but blitz scaling has actually become quite out of date quite quickly. Given
fair enough.
Economy. I'm not saying, Reid Hoffman's far more successful than me. I'm not saying it's a wrong model, but it's a certain type of business. And actually, Mohan, maybe you'd like to jump back in. Mohan is a good example of someone, he's raised money, but he's done it very strategically. And as he built up the platform and got to know his community, he's built up the business based on next decision fundraising. Right, Mohan? You can speak for yourself.
Yeah, so I learned this in army, right? You have to be very clear what you want to be and what you want to do, right? Some people are very good at raising a ton of money and burning a lot of that as well in the process, right? And then finding an exit somehow. I've never been good at that. I actually don't enjoy the fundraising process at all. I enjoy making money, like revenue and profit, but it kind of boils down to what kind of founder you want to be. That's the first part.
Yeah.
The second part is what kind of company do you want to have, right? Like, I really don't think there's a right or wrong approach to this. Bumble raising billions. Yes, there is a massive opportunity still in the dating space. I'm very happy for them to do that. But I mean, there are enough companies in the world, for example, Atlassian, that I'm a huge fan of, that never raised a single dime and went public. And I think they're like $50 billion worth now. So there are many approaches to the game. The key is to figure out the approach that makes the most sense for you and the kind of business that you're building.
That's good advice.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, couldn't agree more. Yeah. Matt, we've talked about a lot of things here. Have we covered what you wanted to talk about?
Do you know what, guys? Wonderful chat. Really, really good. I like it. I like a good, robust conversation. Actually, I've made so many notes, so it's been really productive for me. Thank you very much for having me on your show.
No problem. If anyone's listening, other than going and clicking on your link, is there anything you would like help with right now from anyone listening? Can you hear me? Good. We have no sound. Mohan, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
I can hear you. Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, I was just saying if there was anything you wanted from the community, I put the links to your website below. But if there's anything you need, I guess you're always looking for more creatives, right? For example, you're probably looking.
Oh, sorry, Simon. I thought you were reaching out to your listeners there. Sorry, I was sorry. Apologies there.
I've only been doing this a year. I guess I'm still learning to be a good host. But I was just asking you, Matt, before I want to make.
Do you know what? A good tech developer would be interesting to talk to. One thing I think it would be really good to talk to someone about tech development in terms of the cost. What do you get for your money in terms of how far do I need to go in terms of developing this platform? That would be a really good guy. Person, man or woman to talk to in terms of
the irony is your platform should have that sort of person on it, shouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Although I'll be honest with you, you can't be a man. It started off as creative, so it'd be lovely to develop into that. Yeah.
They would argue they're creative. But have you been on platforms like AngelList and seen, did you look at what the list of people that Airbnb laid off? There was quite a lot of talent they laid off. They did a whole website on it.
Okay, so what would be your recommendation sites for tech help? AngelList.
Definitely go check out E27. They've got a lot of cool things on there. A lot of people that write articles on there that link back to tech knowledge. Mohan, you have any thoughts on this? I can only plug your site. I don't want to plug other people's.
Mohan, do you have a tech guy, a tech person that could cost me up a platform?
We have an internal tech team. Do you currently have a tech team at all?
No. The business is me.
Okay, so there's no like who works on your website and all those kind of things.
So I have a freelancer who's fantastic working on who works on the website, who I have on a retainer each month. But I suspect building the platform itself might be a slightly bigger task.
Yeah. So in certain situations like that, it helps to. So there are a few things, right? There are platforms like Entrepreneur First and the likes that help for you to figure out who's the right co-founder or potentially like a tech co-founder for you to get linked up to. I think that's something important to think about. If you're a sole founder, and especially if you're not technically trained, it can be very challenging to build a tech-centric business.
So sorry, what were those sites again? They were.
So Entrepreneur First is, for example, an accelerator that really helps with matchmaking you to co-founders.
Okay, perfect, brilliant.
I know they have one in London, right? I know they have one.
They do, yeah. I know them very well. I can introduce you, Matt. But the key is you have to want a co-founder, and they often operate through kind of a PhD model and quite disruptive.
Very deep tech guys, yeah.
But it's an amazing model. Very good tip from Mohan for you to look at. But yeah, I mean, I can connect you up to that afterwards. Carry on, Mohan.
Yeah. So I think if you want to bring the business forward, you kind of need to think about bringing in one or two partner level people, right, to help you, right? They could be in the tech space, they could be in the product space. That's something for you to think about, right? In terms of hiring,
what was the second? What was the second? You said Entrepreneur First, and there was a second one as well.
No, it was just Entrepreneur First.
Apologies.
Yeah. The other thing for you to think about is this, right? Like the freelance model, which is actually what we started with as well, right? We used to hire a few tech freelancers. That will help you get to the prototype phase or a bare minimum product, right? But the challenge with tech is that in the early stages, you really do have to rebuild it a few times. In order for it to scale. So at some point, you do need a senior technical person that is willing to really lead the technical aspect of the company's growth, right? Like a CTO kind of level. Finding that person is going to be difficult, but in your case, because you already have a platform, it's a lot easier than just purely pitching the product. My suggestion is for you to hang out at tech meetups, to find tech communities that exist online. There are a lot of people that have probably worked in digital or marketing agencies doing tech-related work that would see a huge opportunity in this. Right?
So what tech meetups do you think I should be...
So I'm not sure about what the ones that exist in Europe, but at least for the ones in Asia, right, there are significant ones that happen on a fairly regular basis. So for the European ones, I think you probably might have to look at... Is there a tech.eu, for example? There's some of the local tech ecosystems.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, there's so many, Matt. There's so many. You can just go even on Meetup and see it. The only thing I would say about it, if you're not technical, they're sometimes quite specialized. And so, I mean, one way to go about this, I mean, this gets asked all the time, by the way, this tech problem that people have as ideas people without the tech, that again, you can do an MVP model, right? You don't have to go out there and reinvent the wheel. Prove the model by creating groups. There's a lot of tech that's already built that you can just leverage initially. Even Clubhouse was built on Slack technology, open source technology, right? It was not go and hire a massive tech team at the beginning. Even now, they're a $1 billion company
one developer
with 9 people, right?
Yeah.
So don't get too obsessed with the tech. One hack that I did in my company is, and maybe I'll translate it into your work. I would go and look at Fiverr. I would go and look at all the people that work at Fiverr, right? And I would go and look for the 5, 6, 7 engineers that are working at Fiverr, and I would have pinged them, and I would say, "Are you interested in having equity in the future of Fiverr?" You know, they probably haven't got equity in Fiverr. They're probably just working there. If you want a purposeful mission and you maybe can poach for someone, it's open game, right? So you can ping them and say, would they be interested in having a chat? Right? They know, they have industry understanding of your what you're trying to do, and they have the ability to do it because they're working at Fiverr already, right? And why not give them that opportunity to be an equity owner or partner in the business, right? I have hired people. I had an agency called Fluid, I keep mentioning. One of the reasons that business did so well was because I hired the person who was running Jack Morton, the largest events company in Asia at the time. And I said to him, "You're never going to own Jack Morton, but you can come and have a piece of my company." And he joined me, and he transformed the business into something special, right? So I think, it's just a hack. There's a hack there for you, I guess. Go look at what companies that are building tech that you like, and maybe don't go to the founder. They're probably not going to move. But you can definitely see if there's people out there, and then go look at Airbnb layoff. I forget the website. They built a website for it, but they've literally had to lay off half their tech team, and then link straight through to their LinkedIn. They might be having a good severance package, willing to invest, and willing to get involved with something like what you're doing. So try your luck. But again, it's like any sales process. You've got to be a bit dedicated to it. I would say I would dedicate myself to finding a CTO more than I would an investor.
I think that's good advice.
Yeah, because it's going to be going to be very hard to get an investor without the tech piece, especially if you're pitching a tech business. So save yourself the pain and spend the next 2 or 3 months getting a partner on board and get that tech box ticked.
No, that's very good advice. Actually, I've heard it from a couple of other people as well.
There's one more final tip I was going to give you, which is to use some of the no-code platforms. So I don't know if you've heard of Bubble.
I'm sorry, no quote platforms.
No code platforms. So there are actually a lot of tools that exist now. There's this entire movement in the world called the no-code movement, where platforms like Bubble.io, allow you to build a full-fledged app through a drag-and-drop interface. And you could essentially build an app like Uber and all that, Airbnb, using no-code tools. It's kind of like PowerPoint for building apps.
Right. Okay. Perfect. Yeah.
And you could, it's like, I think it's like $100 a month. They have the full-fledged front-end and back-end infrastructure. You could build an entire app on your own without the use of a developer. There's definitely a bit of a learning curve, but I would think it's fairly easy to figure it out.
Perfect. Brilliant. Excellent.
Great, Matt. I hope you found it useful today.
Really useful, guys. Great chat, and I wish you all the best, Simon, for growing this. It's absolutely brilliant. I think your advice is fantastic. Thank you, Mohan. Thank you very much.
And very
Matt,
nice talking to you, man.
Post this on your social media, because then someone might be listening and go, "Hey, that sounds like a job for me," and might ping you. So push all the buttons of luck. See you, Matt.
Cheers, guys. Thank you very much.
All the best.
You are a superstar. I want to co-host these things with you more often. Really enjoyed your insights today. So thanks so much. Really fantastic.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I know how busy you are as well, building what you're building. And so thanks for taking the time out and joining us in a slightly odd time zone. Appreciate it very much. And I'll be catching up with you again in the next week. I think we'll have a call. So thanks for joining. See you.
Keep doing the amazing thing you do, Simon. Thanks.
Likewise, my friend. Likewise. See you soon.
All right. Take care.
There you go, guys. That's today's podcast. I hope you found it insightful, interesting. If Mohan or Matt, either of them, you got any value from their insights and openness and the conversation, do me a favor. Go click through to their portals, show them some love, click on their social medias and give them a like. It doesn't cost you anything. In addition, if you felt any of what was discussed here today about finding a co-founder, finding an investor, business modeling, and all of those things that we've discussed here could be useful to anyone out there starting a business or presently struggling with their business, feel free to share the broadcast and let people know there's some answers to some of their questions out there. And finally, if you want to start a business or have started a business and are struggling, you can also come onto this podcast and get help from people like Mohan and myself and the community listening. So feel free to sign up via purposefulproject.com and let us know how we can help you. I hope wherever you are in the world today, you can have a wonderful, enjoyable, safe distance day. I'll see you soon.